All right. Are you worried that your dialogue is dumb in your book? I think we've all been there. We're reading it and we're like, oh, this is not good. This is not right. Well, be calm. We're here for you. We've got 3 tips that will help you evaluate your own dialogue and elevate it to the next level. And if you're wondering what we mean by a dialogue being dumb, have you ever watched a movie and you're sitting there and you know exactly what that next character is going to say before they even open their mouth? It's predictable. It feels flat. It doesn't spark interest. Why don't you comment below with the dumbest piece of dialogue you've ever heard? And don't be that person. And why don't you, Morgan, tell us about the first point for how we can avoid that?
The whole time you're thinking about that, I have this memory of watching this movie. I don't even remember what it was, where he's flirting with this girl and he's like, "Can I smell your hair?"
Oh,
And I just remember being like, "Oh my God." And that's the opposite of being predictable, but still dumb. Point number 1, which is how can we write characters that have interesting dialogue? Well, you don't want it to be overly predictable, like Molly said, but you certainly don't want it to be so weird that we're creeped out by the main character, or it's so outside of the norm that we're having an aversion to watching or reading your story. So, the first point that we want to talk about is how you can make your characters different and still relatable. And so, the point there is if you go back to our episodes before, we did a really great episode on characterization, and Molly and Teresa had some amazing insights. And they'll talk about how to develop round characters. And once your character is round, we know that they have a motive, something they're after. And we know that the structure of your plot is set up where you have somebody who wants something and somebody who wants something else or is keeping them from that thing. If the dialogue always goes back to that motive, then it creates kind of a tension that creates a difference in voice. And so one way you can do it is just simply pulling off of the motive from the character, but that's not usually enough. So I'm going to volley this over to my friend Teresa, who's really good at dialogue, and she's going to talk to you about how you can use grammar to actually make your dialogue even more distinct, more original.
so one of the things that you want to do, and I'm going to preface this by saying I literally hear my characters and I'm literally transcribing them, and my early drafts are very dialogue heavy because of this. But one way that I translate that into written word is whether or not my characters have short, punchy sentences, or they use a lot of and then, and then, and then, and then. And then you're breaking it up with commas, or they talk really fast. So you got dashes going on.
Guilty.
Or they're a very slow character. They say what they're going to say in a minimal amount of words. And so that's how you can translate onto the page and make your characters sound different from each other.
That's brilliant.
Molly, are we missing anything before we move on to 2? So we're looking at their motives being different. So they have different goals in the scenes when they're talking, right? And then Teresa just mentioned that we're talking specifically about length of sentence, word choice, actually trying to hear your voices. Is there a third thing you would add to that? Or are we ready to move on to number 2?
I think we're ready to move on to number 2.
Awesome.
And to me, number 2, something I love quite a lot, is remember to contextualize your dialogue. People talk about in real life, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. So much of how we communicate is more than the literal words we use. It is our gestures, our body language, if we're leaning in or leaning away, our tone, how fast we're talking, all these kinds of things, which make it really difficult when you're writing because you can't, you just see the words, right? So you have to remember to give context to those things. You have to put your characters in a time and a place. You have to have your characters reacting to each other as they're talking. And maybe in point 3, Teresa might talk a little bit about this. They might even be reacting to not necessarily what the other person is saying, but how the other person is acting. Right? Oh, I love how your hair smells is very different if you're at a hair salon
Right.
versus on a first date. You have to give this context, you know. It's very different if it's your best friend and she's like, "Oh, did you try a new shampoo? Your hair smells really good." Or again, it's a first date wearing a fedora. Uh, like you have to put context in there. You have to give it some shape, right? Your dialogue is more than just your dialogue. It's what is around your dialogue. What did I miss?
Mannerisms. Another way you can make your dialogue sound different is by putting intentionality behind your character's mannerisms. Not all your characters should be quirking an eyebrow. I hate that. That drives me absolutely crazy. One or two characters could quirk an eyebrow. Running hands through hair. That is a common one. I do that. That is a mistake I make. All of my characters, early drafts, run their hands through their
Everybody,
hair.
all the time.
Do you want to know what mine is? Mine is that they tuck their lips into their mouth.
As somebody I edited for, she bit her lip. Her characters were always biting their lower lip.
And even it's worth saying, like, even if you kind of narrow it and you have one character who's always messing up their hair, even if you're doing that all, they can't be doing that all the time either. Like, you have to give it some space, you know?
And you'll see in some historical books, smoking can be a really good one to help break scenes up. And oh my gosh, smoking, fabulous, fabulous way of adding. Number 3, subtext. The other thing you need to be doing is identifying what is happening behind the scene. What is your character actually trying to say with their dialogue? Because none of us ever say exactly what we intend to say. We're always filtering it constantly. You, as the author, need to know what every character is thinking in that scene. Now, I'm not talking about the waiter. Ignore the waiter. Who cares about the waiter? Unless the waiter is an important part of your scene. So I'm going to use my debut novel, Warehouse Dreams, as an example here. And if you've read it, when Kendall and Stephen meet. Now, Kendall and Stephen, this is kind of a light enemies to lovers. When they first meet, Kendall's like, who the heck is this guy? What an asshole. And it's in first person, so we only know Kendall's point of view. I, as the author, I know what Stephen's point of view is, and Stephen's point of view is, ooh, who's her? Well, she's kind of cool. I think I kind of like her. Oh my God, she is being so rude to me. Why is she being so rude to me? I don't, what is happening here? I was so nice to her. So again, it's that subtext, and that drives your dialogue to help sound different from each other.
And it's even, you know, think about when you're trying to tell someone bad news and you don't maybe, or you're trying to give someone a critique, you're trying to tell them that they have lettuce in their teeth or whatever it might be. You know, usually you're like, hey, how's it going? So I kind of noticed a thing, right? Like how you deliver that news tells the reader, how a character delivers that news or how a character chooses to do that tells the reader a lot about who that character is and how that relationship exists, right? Because if a character just walks up and they're like, hey, Teresa, you're trailing some toilet paper, you know, that says something different, right? There's different things here. Do we need to edit that one out? I don't know. This is important. It tells you much more than just the surface level.
My aha moment with that is that really different kinds of characters use different amounts of subtext. So my aha moment, just as I was listening to Molly and Teresa, I was like, oh, that's it. Like when you have a more calculating character, a more maybe intellectually adept character, they might be using a lot more filtering or a lot more subtext in their dialogue, but maybe you make a choice to have a really impetuous character and they don't filter at all. And so just the choice of having one character who's always filtering and one character who's not would create so much authenticity and difference, because like you don't necessarily always want to read a novel where everybody's filtering either, and there are those of us who don't filter as well as other people, and that can be a fun thing too, is just to mess with filters, or somebody who filters all the time but in this certain setting they don't filter as much. So that was a really fun aha moment for me, to think about how I can make my characters even more diverse by just using their own, I'll use them, you know, the idea of subtext, but also I think filters would work there too. So thank you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome.
You've given me an aha moment, which I think is very related to yours, but I want to rephrase it slightly. It is not everybody says what they think.
Yes. And I will also add to that, first person point of view are liars. They are unreliable narrators because we all lie to ourselves. So picking your point of view matters too. All right. Anything else to add?
Go write your dialogue.
Yeah. Go have fun. Listen to your characters. Transcribe it. Have a blast with this one. We'll see you around.